Alright, today we're going to do the front shocks on a Jeep Grand Cherokee, and one of the things I like to do is I like to let the suspension hang from the body. So I put my jack stands onto the frame and then lower the hydraulic jack down so that the vehicle is supported by the jack stands, and then I use the hydraulic jack as a backup. And that allows the shock to be fully extended, and I don't have to deal with compressing it to get it in place. Alright, so I have the vehicle supported by the frame with the jack stands, and I have my hydraulic jack as a backup. And this is going to be a reach-in. I'm not going to get underneath the vehicle. I don't like hydraulics as a backup. Another nice thing about doing the shocks on a Jeep Grand Cherokee, and actually most Jeeps throughout the years, now it doesn't matter which model it is, notice that the coil spring is separate. And this will allow you not to deal with the coil spring. You can just deal with the shock. So about the biggest problem you'll have is trying to compress it to get it into place, which I have hopefully taken care of that problem by supporting the vehicle at the frame and letting the suspension be fully extended down. Then I only maybe have to bring the bottom of the shock up to put it in place. Alright, for the bottom, both sides are fairly accessible. You can get sockets in there and wrenches in there, and it's pretty straightforward. It's the top that is going to give you some trouble. On the passenger side, it's not so bad. All you have to do is move the air conditioning hose out of the way, if it's even in the way to begin with, and that will expose the top of the shock, and you can get your wrenches on there and loosen it up. However, the driver's side is absolutely buried. It's underneath the master cylinder here, and I'll show you how to get to that very easily, and it'll make your job a whole lot better and quicker. Alright, the bottom's pretty straightforward. If it comes with new hardware, use the new hardware, but really all of your hardware that's going to come with the shock is going to be for the top. Alright, your front shock is going to come with some rubber grommets, washers. You may or may not need them. I highly recommend using the new ones and not reusing the old ones. There's some documentation that comes with it that shows you what order everything goes in. So depending on your vehicle, it'll show you the placement of the washers and the grommets. Also, under no circumstances are you to use an impact wrench. If you try and put the top nut on with an impact wrench, it'll break right there at where the threads are, and you will be hating life. Because there it goes. No, they will not replace it. So no impact wrench. I don't even use it on disassembly. Now the top of this guy can be a pain in the ass. First of all, on the driver's side, there's about everything in the world is on top of it, so you can't really get to it. And even on the passenger side, the air conditioning hose on my vehicle is in the way. So, you know, you need to get like a wrench on there, or some channel locks or vice grips or something to hold it in place to keep it from spinning while you take the nut off. So I like to put channel locks on there and then use a crow's foot on there, because you can't really put a socket over there because now you've covered it up and you can't stop the shaft from turning, you know, because this is all hidden in the body of the vehicle. You know, you only have this exposed with the nut on there. So it's fun stuff. So first let's remove the old one, and then we'll put in the new ones. So what I found on Chrysler vehicles is they're pretty much metric. Every once in a while I can get a standard tool to fit on the nut or bolt better than the metric, but for the most part, try your metrics first. There's really not a mix in the vehicle, even though some of your standard sizes will fit the bolts like I just said. Also, you're really not going to get a socket on there. There's not enough room. It'll be at an angle. You might be able to get it off. I don't even try. I go right with the wrench and undo them. Alright, so here's my setup. Just a wrench on top, socket on the bottom, and undo it. And this is the easiest bolt for the camera. The other ones might require you to be a little more creative. But don't forget, this is a reach-in job. You are not to get underneath the vehicle. Alright, so here's my setup for the passenger side. I have like a 6mm opened end wrench that I'm going to hold it with, and I have 17mm crow's foot, and that's just attached to a 12-inch extension and my ratchet. So I'll get started on breaking that nut loose and disconnecting it. Alright, that really wasn't any fun. Basically what I did is I'd move the hose out of the way, set my crow's foot, put the other wrench on top, turn the crow's foot, it'd be maybe a half a turn. Then I'd have to move the hose out of the way, reset the crow's foot, replace the wrench on there, and I did this about 7 or 8 times, and then it was free. It's a locking nut, and once it passed the locks I was able to unscrew it the rest of the way. So that was fun. Now this is where suspending the car by its body and not suspension really comes into play. You can see how low this clearance is. I can't get a tire on, I have to jack it back up. But that allows me so much room with the shock to get the shock out. It'll make it real easy to maneuver that out. Alright, here's the bottom out. I was able to lift that up just by pushing up on it a little bit, but you can see that hole there. So you can see how the shock is recessed down onto the mounting plate. To get the old one out, you may have to get a bottle jack or something to jack it up and get it out of there. Or if you don't have the suspension hanging from the body, you may have to get a bottle jack to compress the shock to get it up high enough, and then like hit it off the bottle jack onto the slot, and then you can wiggle it to line up the holes. So sometimes that's necessary. Also, I have to apologize. When I went in to edit, my camera had went bad, so now I'm just outside after the fact filming what I lost. So I apologize for that. But in order to access the top of the driver's side, what you want to do is you need to remove that first flange bolt. It's holding on a bracket. There's an electrical connection on the inboard side. You may want to take that off to give you some more room. There's also electrical connection that goes underneath. That one you can just leave that one hooked up. It's kind of a pain to disconnect. This will allow you to get like a deep well socket back there to get that other flange nut off. Now what you want to notice is there's 2 nuts. There's one nut that holds on the mounting plate, and then there's another one that holds on the master cylinder, because you're going to need to remove the master cylinder. You might want to remove the breather tube. It just pops right off. That'll give you some room so you can fold over the master cylinder, because what you want to notice is right down here there are 2 flex lines, and those flex lines allow you to fold the master cylinder over to the inboard side out of the way. Now I found that bracket to be a bit of a pain in the butt. It barely got out of the way so I could get to the other flange nut. And when you do disconnect the reservoir and master cylinder from the vacuum assist, you might hear air rush out or in. So after you remove the 2 bolts, you want to pull the master cylinder out. There's a sleeve on the master cylinder and a stud inside there with the diaphragm and spring assist. Once that's clear, then you can just fold it off to the side, and you will be able to access the top of the shock very easily. It's much easier than the passenger side. So there's a shot of the new hardware installed. You can see it's all nice and shiny and clean. And again, I apologize that my camera went bad on me and I'm just shooting this after the fact. But once the master cylinder is out of the way, you just have plenty of room to access the top of the shock. About the only other tip I have is you'll see that the end of that stud is not threaded all the way. Well, that'll help keep you from dropping the flange nut off, and also when you start it, it'll slide on and stay in place before it even starts to thread. That's a nice little thing. Sometimes I take a pencil magnet and I'll touch it with a pencil magnet, or if I'm using a socket, I'll put my magnet on the end of that socket, and that'll help keep it from falling down into the engine compartment. And that's really about the last trick I can tell you about on this job. It's really pretty straightforward and easy, especially if you can allow the suspension to hang down from the body. If you do have to use your floor jacks on the axle, then you're just going to need a bottle jack or enough strength to compress the shock absorber. These shocks weren't bad. Some of them are really, really stiff. Some of them are really, really easy. So it's just a matter of what you have to deal with. Well, the only thing I did that you probably won't do yourself is this boot here was compressed after I installed it. It was all squished up, and I like it to look nice and neat like you see it here. So I had to cut the wire tie and slide the boot further down and then retie it off. The wire tie was a bit too tight for me to just pull it down. I didn't realize that till after the fact, so if you want to pull it down ahead of time, that would be great. Alright, so once again I apologize that I didn't have the shots when I was actually doing the work, and I'm just kind of commenting after the fact. I'll try and do better. Thank you.